Hi, my name is Liam O'Neill, and I'm the keyboard player in the Stills. How you doing? The Stills is a rock band from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, formed about 4 years ago by a group of friends that had been playing music together in various bands for, I guess, the last 10, 15 years or so. When we formed, it was basically around the premise that Tim and Dave had been writing all these songs on their 4-track and passing it back and forth to each other and sharing songs, and we had been playing in lots of other people's bands for like 5 years or so after our original band broke up, and someone said, why don't you guys ditch all those other things, all these sideman projects that you're doing, and just start your own thing again with these great songs that you've been writing. So that was, I guess the idea was to like put a band together to propagate that music. We were all born and raised here. Dave and Oliver from the band met when they were about 2 years old in the suburb they live in, and they met Tim when they were about 14 or 13, no, 12 even, and they played in a metal band together called Amentum. And then I met Dave because he went to the school that was in the same building as my school, both alternative schools. Mine was a fine arts school, his was like an even more alternative school, both really great schools called Face and Mind. And we met basically through a common friend who had just transferred into my school for the last year of high school, and needed a saxophonist for a ska band. I don't even know what ska was at the time, but it seemed like a fun thing to do, and so we went out to Dave's basement in Lachine, and I met all those other guys, I guess, 1996. When the Stills got their deal, I wasn't in the band at the time. I had during the time where we were all doing all sorts of different projects and playing on other people's records and all sorts of other stuff, I had kind of picked up and left town on and off for a year and a half. I was playing jazz music in a trio on a cruise ship, but I was still keeping in touch with everybody, and Oliver was emailing me all the time with like updates of what was happening. And when they went to New York for the first time, and it was crazy, and they were moving people to like be able to afford to pay the rent, they were like movers schlepping stuff up and downstairs. And then it was like I would see them at Christmas, and it'd be like, I think there's something stirring, and then I would get emails, and then finally I got one saying, all right, we have a deal, and we need to make a record, and we don't have a keyboard player, and much longer are you going to be doing this cruise ship thing? And I was like, well, I was planning on leaving May whatever. And he was like, great, because May the next day is when we're starting pre-production, so why don't you fly in, and then we'll start working on the record, and I just kind of came out of the blue like that for me. I think it's really important when you start a band to really be able to hang out and spend a lot of time with the people in your band, because you're going to need to in order to last and to succeed. And especially if you do get any kind of deal and you have to go on the road and stuff, you're going to be spending 24 hours a day together. But I think the best way for a band to succeed is really to just not break up ever, and whether that means changing styles all the time, because you grow as a person, and so you grow as a musician and you change, but to just keep on trucking. I think for Montreal bands, mostly like the English Montreal bands, the key for most of these bands has had to be, unfortunately, leaving Montreal, because Montreal is kind of the hub of French Canada. It's the second biggest city in Canada, but it's in Quebec, which is a French province, and so all the industry here is to support French music, French artists, because there's 7 million French-speaking people in Quebec. So there's not a lot of industry for, English bands or songwriters or anything, just because there wouldn't, in Italy there's not a huge industry for French bands, you know what I mean? So we had to go to New York, all these other bands, the Deers, they met some success in Canada, but it was really when they got kind of some serious attention in the UK that things picked up for them. Sam Roberts even, he's huge in Canada, but he's about, 5 times more popular in Toronto than he is in Montreal, just because of the whole English industry there. And Arcade Fire as well. Their kind of breakout stuff happened in the States, and then abroad, you know. All these, yeah, but I think bands, you just need to, you know, believe in the songs you're writing and, you know, be friends with the people you're working with and just keep playing. I think if you're gonna, if you want to be in it for the long haul, and you know, you got to be willing to kind of let it all hang out on the line, because it's gonna a lot, you know. Writing songs and having someone review them is the same thing as, you know, it's putting it all out there, as much as saying, well, I'm gonna schlep this fridge up these 8 flights of stairs so that I can pay rent, so that I can be in a city where there's people paying attention to the music scene and where there's actually anything. Yeah, you really need to you know, be no qualms and no, like, don't take no ever for an answer, you know. I definitely think that it's a good thing, all the interest that, you know, is being paid to Montreal these days, with all these great bands that have come out of here to kind of like put a flag up to say, hey, here we are from Montreal, you know, check, there's all sorts of music coming out of this city that no one seemed to pay attention to for, I don't know, however many years. But I think it's still the case that the bands that are drawing the attention to the city are not getting it initially within the city. You know, there's definitely more of a scene here than there ever was. I mean, I guess there's more of a scene in that people think there's more of a scene. The people that are here are like, even the people that are going to shows, they're conscious of the fact that these homegrown bands, these bands from here, are being, you know, everyone's into them around the world, you know. So there's a little more pride, I guess. But there's still not a lot of, like, none of the bands that are drawing the attention to Montreal are doing so initially in Montreal. You know, Wolf Parade are the newest kind of, I guess, buzz band out of here, and they toured for a bunch, opening for Arcade Fire, and they got a deal with Sub Pop, I think, and Isaac of Modest Mouse even produced their record. So all their stuff was all, again, external, you know, and they're still drawing the public eye back here, you know, and it's great, and hopefully one day a band will be able to, you know, form here and play in clubs here, and, you know, people will be interested in them here, and they'll be able to actually, you know, sprout forth, you know. In the last little while, the bands that have been kind of coming out of Montreal, one of the reasons I find that it's strange that there's a lot of talk of this scene that's here and all this. There's one thing that I've noticed is that there's definitely no Montreal sound. None of these bands sound alike, from, you know, the Stills to the Arcade Fire, Wolf Parade, the Deers, Islands. All these bands are all kind of coming from really different places and going different places, you know. And a lot of the people in the bands didn't actually grow up here. I know the Deers did, and Sam Roberts did, and we all did. But, you know, it's a big city, and people come from different places and have different lives and, you know, live different experiences, so they have different stories to tell, and they'll tell them in different ways. But I do think that all those bands have definitely taken something in from the city, because it's such an artsy, bohemian, kind of bon vivant city where you can really, it's a great place to be a band when you've already, like, had some success and you're traveling a lot. It's a great place to come home to because it's really cheap. There's great food and great people and lots of fun to be had, but not a lot of work in the city. So I think that wears off on people creatively. But another thing I think that pushes people to write and to be artists in the city is the winter, because it's perpetual. It's like 6 months long, and it's so cold most of the time that you don't even want to be outdoors. So you either huddle together in your rehearsal space, or you huddle together in your studio painting, or you huddle together in a bar talking about not wanting to go back home because you have to go outside, and everyone has to pay these ridiculous heating bills, and a lot of people get very depressed and have, you know, because there's not a lot of daylight and not a lot of warmth, and so people have a lot of, you know, I guess people have a lot of things to write about. It's really fun being a, you know, mixed language band. I mean, every single member of the band is fluent in both French and English, though Oliver and Julien, our drummer, are both 100% French. Dave's half-half, one English parent, one French parent, and Tim and I are both English. There's never really been any kind of tension where we switch back and forth between languages all the time without even knowing we're doing so, to the point where like our sound guy, who's the only guy that tours with us that doesn't speak any French, sometimes he'll be like, wait, stop, that was in French, I don't understand what you're saying anymore. But the English-French tension that's existed in Montreal for the last 25 years or so, never really, I mean, no one feels any of that within our band. I think we just have a secret language when we travel. That's kind of... Well, it's an interesting thing when you actually make a record, because, you know, chances are you've been writing and playing music for a long time, and you have a collection, you know, of so many songs that are not going to be on this record, and you have songs from 5 years before, and you'll continue to write songs forever. But whatever your first record, for everybody, like, that's what they generally form an opinion of you with, because it's the first thing that everybody kind of can attach to you. So it's hard, I guess, for listeners and for fans to realize that that's really just it's a cross-section at a specific time of, you know, you in your life and your experiences. And that's why I think a lot of bands feel pressures to not change, because they're like, people like us because of this, so they won't like us if we do anything else. But I think that's really counterintuitive. I think the truth is that if someone liked you at some moment, for some reason, for whatever sound you produced, for whatever songs you wrote, whatever album you put out, then you have to have faith in the fact that had it come 5 years earlier or 5 years later, you know, you're still the same person. You just have lived different things, and you're saying different, you know, you're living different experiences, and you're telling different stories, and you've changed, and you've listened to other music, and you've had different relationships. So, you know, people grow, and so you need to grow, and you need to just keep making music. And it really, if it doesn't represent your growth, then I don't think it's really, I don't think it's fair to the people who are your fans, because I think you're holding something back. I personally, I come from a different musical background than most people that I know in bands, and that I was raised in a fairly musical family. My mom was almost a concert violinist, and my dad taught me how to read music when I was 4, and to play piano, and I started taking piano lessons when I was very young. And I've always had a house full of everything from like Bartok string quartets to you know, the Beatles and you know, John Coltrane, and kind of a whole, what you hope, you know, like the kind of record collection you hope to have when you grow up and you start, you know, buying vinyl for yourself or whatever, you know. So I was very fortunate in that respect to have already come through all sorts of different styles and completely different genres of music by the time I started playing in bands. So, but there's so much that I still don't listen to, and I would need to discover, and it seems like every month I discover someone else that I'd never listened to. And I think it's really important when making music to listen to radically different music than the stuff that you're doing, because that's a good way to think outside of the frame that you're used to thinking in. You know, like I got Dave really into Bela Bartok's solo piano music and some early Bach preludes and fugues. And, you know, when you listen to that stuff, you can totally tell that Paul McCartney was listening to that when he was writing for the Beatles, and he was listening to Tchaikovsky here and there, like when he's figuring out how to arrange songs and all sorts of stuff. But it should be a conscious effort. If you're a musician, then that's your job, and so, you know, if you don't spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week doing something along those lines, then, you know, you're not really doing your job as a musician, I find. I try to practice as much as I can and listen to as much music as I can. I think like any new medium, you know, something like the internet, when it comes around, it's gonna take a few years for people to adjust to it, you know. So at first it's like it was this huge, people were worried, like all the industry was worried, because all of a sudden there's all this file sharing happening, and people are just getting music for free that in the past they would have bought and paid for, you know. and so it takes away, it hurts record sales, and it hurts radio stations, and it hurts all sorts of stuff. But I think, like anything, you know, it was bound to happen. It'll take a few years for people to adjust to it, but now the internet and blogging and all sorts of stuff like that can make bands that would have needed to, you know, go somewhere and like truck it out for a long time, you know, and you can with like the digital age, you can do a recording in your home that and have it sound half decent, that would have taken thousands of dollars in studio time in the past, you know. So people, as a result, there's obviously a lot more kind of half hack recordings happening out there, but it's a good tool for good artists to have their stuff heard without needing to, you know, play showcases in LA and all sorts of crazy things like that, you know. I think depending on what you plan to bring to whatever band you're in or whatever kind of music you're playing, the most important thing I've found is to live experiences and do things that are, you know, out of the ordinary, or not necessarily out of the ordinary, but away from, you know, any kind of routine. Like, there's a lot of great songwriters, but once they've traveled and stuff, then they have so much more to say because they've seen so much more and been so much more affected. But I think the main thing, if you want to just succeed, is to just keep going, you know? You know, unless you've been going for 25 years and, you know, you're hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, you know, I see no other reason. Like, if it means that enough to you, then you shouldn't ever stop. I'm ecstatic that I'm making a career in music, and I think I knew from a young age that I was going to. I just didn't know kind of in which field or domain or doing what at all. Like playing any, still don't even know what I'll be doing 5 years from now. But I think that's kind of exciting for me. But I've been living off music for 6 years now, since I was about 19 years old. I only had one job ever, and I wasn't very good at it. So I'm glad I've been able to do this.